This also goes for every Trinbagonian who want to live in a foreign land. Now is the time to come home and do something instead of staying out there in prison. Because now, more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come let us go hand in hand, because this is our land. Come my brother, come my sister, and let us build a nation together.
Come, my brother, come, my sister, and let us build a nation together. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique belong to all of us, and we must work to improve it, to make it better. So come, let us work together to build Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. I want to encourage those on Facebook and YouTube to please share the live. Sharing is caring. I want to start off by saying, do not be fooled by the NNP and the pundits when they speak about contract workers being placed under a new pension plan or scheme. Do not be fooled by that. Because the first thing you must know is that the NNP was the one responsible as a government for putting workers on contract. So that's the first thing you have to establish and you must know. The NNP is responsible for all these workers who are on contract and have no pension upon retirement. Remember, the NDC came into power and the public servants who qualified for their pension and their gratuity, and you know, they retired, but they qualified for their pension and gratuity. They were paid their pension and gratuity by the NDC administration. The NNP refused for many, many years to pay them their pension and their gratuity. The election came, the NDC promised to pay. Even if they had to take a loan, they would pay. We heard from Keith Mitchell the amount of money it will cost the economy. Estimated cost was $465 million. The NDC came into power and it only cost $75.1 million. That's all. And the pensioners, they continue to get their pension every month until they die. So that's something you need to establish, understand. The contract workers who are in the public service, they are there because the NNP brought them in on contract. They did not make them permanent. They wanted them to be loyal to that administration. Because once you're on contract, if you breathe too hard, if you say certain things, they don't have to renew your contract. So you have no job security. Zero job security. So once you establish that, the people who are on contract, they were placed on contract by the NNP so that they would be loyal to the NNP administration, and they had no job security. The people who qualified for a pension and gratuity, the NDC came in and they paid them their gratuity, that's their lump sum, and they paid them their pension, and they still paying their pension until they die. That pension, however, is the 1958 or so law. It's a pension law that speaks to public officers and what they are entitled to. 66.66% of the highest emolument. So almost 70% of their salary. That is what they're entitled to. Both parties made it very clear that the size of the public service, based on the size of the public service, with established workers and contract workers, it is unsustainable. The pension plan, the pension that stands, that's there, is unsustainable. It will not be able to sustain everybody. It will run government bankrupt, right? Because the government is the only one paying the pension to the officer when they retire, to the public servant when they retire. So it's unsustainable. The union, however, they want the government to continue to pay public officers who retire the same pension, but make them permanent. So they want the contract workers to be made permanent, and once they make them permanent, they then fall under that 1958 law to get their gratuity, their lump sum, and to get almost 70% of their last highest salary. The government is saying that's not sustainable. As it stands now, the 2,000, almost 3,000 contract workers, they could be sent home. The government doesn't have to renew their contract. As it stands now, when the contract expires, or once the contract up, the government doesn't have to renew it. And there is a clause in the contract which says that with 1 month notice, in lieu of 1 month notice, you can be sent home. That's how the NNP administration designed these contracts, to send these people home with 1 month notice. So there is zero job security where that is concerned. But what the union wants, even if the union knows that the pension plan, the pension as it is now, is unsustainable. It cannot accommodate everyone in the public service. So the 2,000 plus to 3,000 or so public officers who are on contract, what the government is saying, if they remain in the public service as it is, they will retire without a pension and without gratuity, because they will not qualify for pension, they will not qualify for gratuity. And it's the fact, because the NNP administration placed these people on contract with no job security, with no pension, and no gratuity upon retirement. They just work in, collecting a salary. So they would make 20 years, 25 years, 26 years on contract and not go home with a pension. That is the situation that exists. That is what the NNP administration put in place. So the NDC administration is saying, we do not want these people to retire and go home without a pension or gratuity. We do not want that. We want them to go home with something. We want them to go home and collect a pension every month until they die. Because as it stands now, once they retire, they are going home with no money, with no pension, with nothing. They will have to depend on NIS when they're 65 to get something. So what the government is proposing is to create a pension plan for the contract workers who are there and will be made permanent. So they will be made permanent. They will be regularized. But before they are regularized, they must fall under this pension plan. Because you see, if the government goes ahead and regularize them, those contract workers, all of them, just regularize them, they will fall under the current pension system, where when they retire, they have to get almost 70% of their last highest salary and gratuity. The government cannot sustain that. They don't have the money to sustain that. The NNP knows that. The NDC knows that. The union knows that. But they think that the government is stupid to go ahead and regularize all these contract workers and then discuss pension reform. It cannot be done that way. That's back into front. It can only be done where you have a new pension system for the contract people, those who are not permanent. They will be made permanent, but as it stands now, they're not permanent. They're on contract as it stands now. They have no job security because the NNP brought them in on contract. If the NNP had cared about these people and them getting a pension and so on, they would have hired them permanently. The NNP never hired them permanently. They hired them on contract with no job security. So the NDC is trying to fix the mess that the NNP created. It's the NNP mess. Firstly, the pension and the gratuity, that was the NNP mess. They could have corrected that years ago. They could have paid the workers their gratuity and their pension upon retirement years ago. They refused. The matter was taken to court. The unions, they had to drag the matter to court. It's amazing. You see? But it's common sense. I don't believe those NNP pundits and surrogates don't know. They know, but they're trying to fool the Grenadian people. So they would call the Shaggy program and talk nonsense. Sheldon Scott, that old tomcat, he will be on his program talking nonsense. And the other programs, utter rubbish. They know that it was the NNP administration who hired workers on contract. So they introduced contract labor within the public service. And once you're on contract, you do not have job security. They can make you go with 1 month's notice. It is simple as that. And if you remain in the public service and you make 25 years, once you're on contract, because they would renew it, you will go home without a pension and without gratuity. It is simple as that. You don't need to be a rocket scientist or some genius to understand. Right? Once you're on contract, when you reach 60 years, you're going home with no pension, no gratuity. The workers who received permanent, meaning they have a letter from the Public Service Commission with a grade or a position within the public service, they will get their pension, almost 70% of their last highest salary, and the gratuity for the amount of years of service that they gave to the government and people of Grenada. That is what exists. So, within the public service, we have 2,000 to 3,000 people who are on contract. What the union wants is for the government to make them permanent first. Give them a letter from the Public Service Commission so they become permanent, and then they fall under the current pension scheme, current pension for government workers, where they have to get the gratuity upon retirement and the almost 70% pension every month. That is what the union wants, right? But if you're already permanent, then government coming to negotiate with you and say, well, the pension plan that exists can't work. It can't sustain all of these people. Let us negotiate and put something new in place. Then you don't have to negotiate, right? You can easily take it to court because you're already permanent. You're already permanent within the system. But these contract workers, they are not permanent. They are contract workers in the system, within government. They're on contract. So the government must first put a pension plan in place, and they must accept that pension plan, and upon that, they're assessed in terms of their performance within the role that they are in as a contract worker, and then be made permanent within the system. Right? So it's a new arrangement. That is exactly what will happen, a new arrangement, where the worker will contribute and the government, the employer, will contribute, so that when they retire, they will get a pension. It is clear-cut. That is what the government is proposing. So when those NNP goons, zygotes, and sycophants go on different programs talking about contract workers to be made, to be given pension, and government wants to reform the pension thing and give them utter rubbish, utter nonsense. You hear me? In other words, if a worker leaves government, that pension will go with them because they contribute and the employer contribute. It would not be like the one that exists now. You have to work for 26 years and 8 months, or else you don't qualify for a pension. You have to work for that. The police, I think, is about 20 years. But public officers, generally, it's about 26 years and 8 months. And some people, they would drag it until they reach that. Many of them, they don't even want to stay there. They want to move on. But they fear that they're going to lose their pension. So they work until that and then they go. Right? So to get your gratuity, to get your pension, you must make a certain amount of years. But the new pension arrangements for these contract workers who will become permanent, right, is for them to contribute a portion, 2%, 3% or something of their salary. Government contribute a certain percentage, and that goes towards their pension. All right? But if they leave government work and they go in the private sector, they still would have that pension plan with them. So they can get the money from it, or they can continue paying into it. So when they retire, they get a pension. It's what government is proposing. And it's a good thing, Because as it stands now, the 2,000 to 3,000 contract workers within government, if they retire, they're going home with nothing. They're going home with nothing. And don't make Brian Grimes fool you. A contract worker is not protected by any union. The unions do not represent contract workers. Of course, they are collecting a certain percentage from the contract workers as union dues. But the union do not speak for contract workers. In fact, the union was lucky that the NDC is in power, and when they negotiated for increases and fringe benefits and other things like that, the NDC accepted and decided to give contract workers too. But under the NNP, that never used to happen. Under the NNP, contract workers were insignificant. When union negotiate, it was only for public servants who are permanently employed, not contract workers. No, not contract workers. And somewhere along, I remember Brian Grimes speaking about that, Somewhere along the line, I remember him speaking about that. Let me just try to get it, because it's important. I love to put facts on the table, right? Let me see if I can play a piece of that, right? When the Public Workers Union signed this agreement and he was talking about the big ticket items and so on.
This is groundbreaking. In the past, we have had very, very serious battles with the past administration in terms of members of our bargaining unit being left out in terms of their ability to secure increases. So having now enshrined in our agreement stating that contract workers will get it, it may have some administrative hiccups in terms of, you have a little extra work to do, but I think it's worth it in terms of the justice and the equity across the public service. So
right.
This is tremendous as far as the union is concerned.
Right. So that's Brian Grimes there.
Out in terms of the ability to secure increases. So having monumental, very, very importantly, and I know I was speaking to a contract worker up here, this package has in it a clause stating contract workers will get the increases, even fixed-term contract workers. This is monumental. This is groundbreaking. In the past, we have had very, very serious battles with the past administration in terms of members of our bargaining unit being left out in terms of their ability to secure increases. So having now enshrined in our agreement stating that contract workers will get it, it may have some administrative hiccups in terms of, you have a little extra work to do, but I think it's worth it in terms of the justice and the equity across the public service. So this is tremendous as far as the union is concerned.
Right. So that's Brian Grimes there. And amazingly, I got that piece of video, and as I click, it brought me to the exact part of the video that I wanted. That's Brian Grimes. The NNP, he made it clear that the previous administration, they had battles with the previous administration when they were negotiating for increase in salaries and so on. And the NNP never granted it, never gave them. The contract workers never got an increase under the NNP. The unions were only negotiating for the workers who were permanent within government, not contract workers. But under the NDC, the contract workers within the public service, they got the increases too, and the fringe benefits and all the different things like that. They got that too, right? So for the NNP to come now and try to make an argument, or even the union to say, well, the pension reform proposed is X and Y. Hello? As it stands now, the 2,000 and something contract workers within government that the NNP hired, the NNP administration hired, they have no pension and no gratuity to get. If they retire today, they have nothing to get. You hear me? Zero, nothing. And the government could make them go with 1 month notice, because that is how the NNP administration designed the contract. The NNP administration designed the contract so that the government could make these workers go with 1 month notice, so they can pay them 1 month salary. So in other words, let's say month end, they can give them 2 salaries. The salary for the end of June, and then they give them 1 month salary for July, but they're not working in July. They make them go. They can do that. But what the NDC administration intends to do is to make these workers permanent. But before they are made permanent, because they cannot fall under the current pension plan that exists, it would make government go bankrupt. It can't happen. And both NNP and NDC acknowledge that. It's not sustainable, because only the government is paying into this pension. It's not sustainable. So what the NDC is saying, we will make you permanent, but first we will design a pension plan for you, where you contribute some and the government will contribute some. When you retire, you will be given a pension every month. So what is wrong with that? I want to ask Panames, Devon Romain, what is wrong with that? I want to ask Sheldon Scott, Tomcat, what is wrong with that? I want to ask Carl Caton, what is wrong with that? I want to ask all those out there, Francis Spear, Jenny Simon, all of those pundits, what is wrong with that proposal? I want to ask Brian Grimes, what is wrong with such a proposal? When the NNP was in power, there was no proposal, there was no engagement. The contract workers, they were going home with no pension, no gratuity. And not only contract workers, those who were permanently employed by government, have their letter from the Public Service Commission. When they retired, teachers, police officers, nurses, doctors, public officers across the board, when they were retiring, when they retired, they were not getting their pension and their gratuity. The NDC came and fixed NNP mess. The NDC came and corrected that by paying the people who were owed their pension and owed their gratuity. NDC paid them and fixed that mess. Now the NDC is working to fix the next mess that the NNP created by bringing in all these contract workers, and they have no pension to go home to and no gratuity. Something has to be wrong with some of those NNP, Either they plain they stupid, or they have mess in the back like a crab. One of the two. Something has to be wrong with you. You have a government who cares about people. First, the NNP refuse to pay public officers who retired their pension. There are some of them who died and did not get their pension. That's a fact under the NNP. The NNP refused to pay them their pension. The NNP was in power for 23 years and a half. And they refused to pay the public officers who retired their pension. The matter was taken to court. The judge ruled in favor of the workers that pension must be paid to them. But that matter didn't have to go to court. It's common sense. The law was clear. You have to pay the people their pension. There are some folks who got their pension and gratuity after 8 years, after 7 years, because the NNP refused to pay. It took the NDC to come in and pay. It was the NDC who paid public officers who retired. Remember, they were marching in the streets for their pension and gratuity on the NNP, and still NNP didn't pay them. They had to go to court to fight it. Court. And the government, the NDC government, no matter the court ruled in favor of the workers and the unions and so on. You think the government was mandated to just pick up $75.1 million and pay workers who retired their gratuity and pension? No. No. They could have outlined a method, a way of paying these people. They could have done so. Don't make them fool you, Don't make them fool you. Right? I think Keith Mitchell outlined how NNP would have gone about doing it. Right? Let me see if I get it. You see, these people believe that they're smart, but they're not smart. All right? They're not. Keith Mitchell will pay, let me see. Keith Mitchell method of paying, let me see. Let me see how you explain this. All right? Let me get it here. Just trying to get it. So, you have to bear with me this morning. All right? Even if I have to ask Kim the Kim for an extra couple minutes with the program this morning, I want to properly explain this thing to you. All right? So let me try this.
The reinstatement of pension for public servants following a court ruling is estimated at $465 million.
Right, so that's the first lie. This estimated cost for the pension from the NNP, that was a lie. It was not $465 million. The NDC eventually paid $75.1 million. So that was the first big lie.
The one-off payment and an additional $120 million annually. However, Dr. Mitchell confidently said payments will begin later this year.
All entitled public officers appointed by the Public Service Commission,
all right,
who will retire in...
So here it is. So that's important. All the public servants who are appointed by the Public Service Commission. So all these contract workers, they are not appointed by the Public Service Commission. So they have no pension to get and no gratuity to get. Because the NNP designed the thing that way. To put these people on contract, when they retire, they go right back into poverty. No pension, no gratuity. All these contract workers in the system within government. So that's something that you need to do. You heard him? He making it very clear. The people who are entitled to the pension, that pension was folks who are appointed by the public service, not the contract workers. Right? Let's continue. Let's hear what he had to say in terms of the method in how they're going to go about. If the NNP had won the election, how they're going to go about in paying the pension. The method.
Who will retire in 2022 at the legally accepted retirement age of 60 will be paid their pension during this year, 2022, when the budget is being presented for 2023.
All right. So he said the folks who retire in 2022, right, who retire in 2022. So remember, you had workers who retired 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, right? 3 years, 2 years. Yes, who retired before 2022. He hadn't mentioned them yet. So his method was those who were going to retire in 2022, right? they would get their pension in 2022. All right? So that's the method. And then he moved on for those who would retire in 2023. That's important.
Budget is being presented for 2023. At the end of 2022, those public servants that will retire in 2023, the pension payment will be in the budget document that we will bring forth for that year. So those in 2023 will also be paid their payment, sisters and brothers.
Right. So that's the NNP method. That is what they were proposing. So those in 2022, they will get paid in 2022. Those who retire in 2022. All right? Those who retire in 2023, they would get paid in 2023. Meaning that at the end of 2022, so at the end or at the beginning of 2022, those who retire, 2021, they will get paid in 2022. Those in 2022 will get paid in 2022. Those who retire in 2020, at the end of 2022, going to 2023, they will get paid in 2023. That is what was proposed. All right? So let's continue to listen to him.
As regards to the pensions that are outstanding and are due to those who retired long before this year.
Right. And that is the point I want to make. Right? But let me call Kim the King and ask him for some extra minutes on the program, right? Because that's important. I would need some extra time on the program this morning to explain this to you. All right? That's important. So let me ask Kim if he can afford me some extra time this morning to explain this to you, because it's important. Hey, Kim, how are you doing?
All right.
Yeah, you could give me some extra time this morning.
All right, okay.
Yeah, blessings flow. Right, so Kim granted that to me. All right, nice. So here it is. So the method, that is what we're looking at here. The method that the NNP was going to take. How they were going to go about paying this pension. So Keith now comes to the people who retired before. And that's the majority of people. That's the bulk of people. That's where the huge amount lies. Those who retired 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. That's where the bulk of the payment lies. He then says, for those who retire within that period, because he dealt with those who were going to retire in 2022 and 2023. All right? So let's listen to it.
That are outstanding.
Right. So when he refers to outstanding, he's talking about those before 2021. Right? Before that.
As regards to the pensions that are outstanding and are due to those who retired long before this year, we will have a phased approach for payment consistent with the national cash flow, and that will be announced shortly.
Right. So Keith Mitchell is saying to the people, right, like the elderly lady who you saw on the television, all right? The elderly lady you saw on the television when our beloved Prime Minister handed that check over to her and she cried, all right? Let me see if I can get it for you somewhere here, right? She literally cried. She actually cried, all right? Let me see if I can get it somewhere. I have it somewhere around the place, let me look for it. Because, I like to put evidence on the table. Evidence is important. Evidence. I love to put evidence on the table. Looking for it here. It's important. Some people plain they don't know what the NNP intended to do to the workers. Right? So let me just play a little piece of that. So this lady here who collected her liquor check And she cried. She literally cried, right? A lot of those workers.
She said, when I see that figure, she said, you're happy for life. And I want to thank the Prime Minister because he didn't have to do it. I work with him. But I want to thank you that today I am here and I feel happy in my spirit. Very happy. Thank you, thank all of you.
That was an emotional thank you by senior pensioner Bernadette Jeremiah, a former health officer thanking the government of Grenada. Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell handed her retroactive pension payment at a press conference on Wednesday afternoon.
Her pension, oh boy. I hope I didn't lose signal there because the audio was down. Boy, things are happening strange this morning. All right, let me make sure I get that. Right, so I didn't lose signal there. Good, so we on the radio. So here it is. I am saying this lady was waiting for a pension for almost 8 years. And there were a lot of public officers who were waiting 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years for the pension. But you heard what Keith Mitchell said there. This man was not going to, in my belief, pay these pensioners. No. They would have been matching, and many of them would have died without getting their pension, in my belief. In my belief. Right? No, I am on the radio. I am on the radio. Yes, I am on the radio. I just checked, and everything is okay on the radio. So, Ali George, no, I'm on the radio. Thank you, Clint. Yes, you're on the radio. Thank you, Clint, there for that. So I'm on the radio. Everything is okay. I have a way of checking easily. So I'm on the radio. So I am saying the method that Keith Mitchell and the NNP was proposing was one that would have caused more problems for public officers who retired. More problems. Those who were out there in the rain for 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, and so on, they would have still be fighting for their liquor pension. But what the NDC did, look at the NDC method. The NDC came in and paid all the people who were owed. Even the estate, those who died, the estate got their money. They came in and they paid all the money. So one, the NNP estimation of the amount of money that was required to pay the pension was a big lie. This $465 million was a big lie. You hear me? We saw, we experienced, it was only $75.1 million. NDC came in and they did not sectionize the pensioners to say, well, that year, this set of pensioners go get, the next year, this set of pensioners. No, they paid all the pensioners who are owed their money, and the pensioners continue to get their pension every month up to today. Every month. So sometimes people forget. They forget what we went through and where we are now. So here it is. You heard Keith Mitchell very clearly. This pension The pension that we are talking about is for workers who are permanently appointed by the Public Service Commission. That's the people who qualify for a pension from government, not those temporary workers, not those on contract. No. And when you hear the NNP, surrogates, goons, zygotes, and sycophants, and then you hear this foolish union guy, Brian Grimes, I always see him as a union donkey. I went to an event only recently and I saw a donkey in the pasture, and my mind ran on Brian Grimes as a union donkey. Sometimes he acts as though he don't have sense. But here it is. When they open their mouth and say, well, the NDC said that contract work was illegal and by a stroke of a pen, they would resolve all this. They know fully well that when the NDC came into power, because remember the NDC was in opposition, when they came into power and they discovered the amount of contract workers, the amount of temporary workers, because remember under the NNP time, the information was not accessible. You just didn't know how many workers here, how many workers there. But anyways, NDC came into power, they paid the pensioners their money, the pension and the gratuity. They then discovered the amount of workers who are temporary, and they outlined how they would go about regularizing these workers. So the NNP is out there giving you the impression that NDC wants to create a pension scheme for the contract workers and to leave them there as contract workers. That is the idea they want to give you. But that's not the fact. That's not the fact. But anyways, the NDC outlined how they would go about regularizing workers in phases.
Peak, and once we cannot perform at our peak, then it affects the economic growth.
Right, so I would play this one after this piece here. I want to play the first piece. I think MTV brought that news item. All right? I think MTV brought that news item.
The Ministry of National Security, Home Affairs, Public Administration, Information and Disaster Management held a press briefing on Wednesday to update the public on the regularization of workers with the announcement of the official launch of the regularization exercise scheduled to commence from October 1st. Permanent Secretary in the Department of Public Administration, Lindonna Hille Marshall, says the process of regularization has already started, with several individuals already confirmed in their positions. The first phase is expected to be completed during the last quarter of 2023.
So the decision was taken for us to approach the regularization on 3 phases. The first phase, we would look at persons in acting, temporary, on assignment, and probationary status on the establishment. And as we mentioned, that process has already started, and we are optimistic by the end of December 2023, we should complete the first phase of the regularization.
Right, so that phase already completed. All right? Those acting in different positions and so on, that phase has already been completed. So don't worry, Brian Grimes, that union donkey, in my view and belief, don't worry with him when he talks his nonsense regarding regularization. That phase was completed already. They're now at the second phase.
Exercise.
The second and third phases, which include the regularization of workers on contractual arrangements and Imani trainees, is expected to be completed over the next 2 years.
The second phase, which would look at persons holding PSC contract, contract of service, daily paid, and persons holding ministry letters, That phase we trust we would be able to advance through in 2024.
Right. So they are now working on that phase within 2024. We are in June. You have July, you have August, you have September, you have October, you have November, you have December. But when you hear that union donkey, Brian Grimes, in my belief, talk is nonsense, you wonder. And of course, the NNP, they would play it on their program. He with his green outfit or shirt or whatever he has on. The guy is a clown. Brian Grimes is a clown, right? And he must remember what they did to him, what the NNP administration did to him. And that is why he ended up where he's working now. Remember, he used to be on the porter? Yeah, he must remember that. But again, some people just like to be battered and bruised in relationships. You see, Tobias Clement, for example, they treat that guy like a piece of shit, like a no good, like a piece of trash. And look today, he's out there defending the same oppressors and abusers politically, his political oppressors and his political abusers. So I am not surprised, right? But nevertheless, they are now in the second phase. The second phase. And that is for this year. And they're continuing that process. So they did the first phase successfully. They are now in the second phase. What the hell you want them to do? Huh? To abandon the next 6 months and complete it in 6 months in the year? They said they would do it in 2024. Give them some time. Let them do their work. Because when NNP was there, NNP was not talking regularization. NNP was just about contract.
And then we're going to be in a position to start looking at the third phase, which would look at people who are holding contracts for service, as well as the Imani trainees.
PS Marshall says
and that would be for 2025, in 2025.
A functional review will also be conducted over the next 8 months to determine the optimal size of the public service.
Of course. So this thing is clear cut, you know. You don't have to be a genius to understand this thing. But I think Grenadians are stupid. So it's a phased approach to the regularization. The first phase completed, they're now in the second phase, and it will complete at the end of the year. And then you could open your big mouth and run your mouth if they fail to complete it at the end of the year. And then in 2025, they then will look at contract for service with government, that's the workers, the contract for service, and the Imani trainees who are working within government for 2025. So it's well outlined. Well outlined. But here it is. These people think they could fool Grenadians because maybe to them they have sense and others don't. You know, when this idiot talked this morning on Plead Your Cause program about contract workers, here it is.
Been in numerous consultations on this exercise, and one of the things that have been reiterated is the fact that the current pension in its construct certainly is not sustainable. And
Right. The current pension plan as it is now is not sustainable.
Rethinking about regularization, where we are looking at the optimal size of the public service, which would mean we are going to grow to allow for us to meet our demands. Certainly, the reform of the pension becomes a most critical issue that we need to address.
Right. You heard? The most critical issue that we need to address, the reform of the pension system. So the people who are on pension, right, who getting their pension from government, you will not be affected. You're getting your pension until you die. The people who are permanent employees of the government through the Public Service Commission. So you're a permanent employee of government. You're permanent. You too will qualify for the pension as it stands now. The pension that exists, where once you make 26 years and 8 months, you qualify for a pension from government of almost 70%, 66.66%, almost 70% of your last highest salary. You qualify for that. And you qualify for gratuity for your years of service to the government and people of Grenada, the lump sum. That is what exists now. So the people who are permanent now, they qualify for that. But the people who are on contract, when they retire, they're going home without a pension and without gratuity. What the NDC administration is saying, we want to help you. We want to make sure when you retire, you go home with a pension. We're going to make you permanent. You're going to be a permanent employee. Of course, it's a different arrangement, but you're going to be permanent. But as a condition for making you permanent, this is the pension plan that you will get upon retirement. This is the pension. You will contribute, let's say 3%, and government will contribute, as an example, 3%, 4%, whatever the amount. Right? So you could contribute, let's say, 5%, 2%. They never specify the percentage. They have not told us the exact percentage as yet. But you will contribute some, and the government, your employer, will contribute some. So you will, upon retirement, when you're at 60 years, you will go home with a pension. That is all the NDC is trying to do, you know. But those NNP nincompoops, those NNP lumpengs, zygote sycophants, goons, they're out there trying to twist this thing to tie up their supporters. Because anybody with sense would understand this basic thing. You don't need to be a genius. The NNP was in power for 23 years and a half. What did they do for the pensioners of the nation? The public officers who retired from government, what did they do for them? Nothing. What did they do for the contract workers? Nothing. You know, these people believe that they can fool you. But I'm putting together a list of all the con men and crooks who came into Grenada under the NNP administration and con the NNP administration of millions of dollars. You see, just how I put together a list of the achievements of the NDC for the last 2 years. I am also doing a list, a detailed list, investigating, getting the information, and putting a detailed list and publishing that also of the amount of con men and crooks that came in Grenada under the NNP administration and con the NNP administration and take taxpayers' money and run with it. I have to publish it because those bad-minded, nasty set of politicians still want to come back and govern Grenada and run Grenada. They still want to come back thinking that Grenadians are going to forget them. The amount of millions and millions we lost as a result of the poor stewardship and management of the little resources that we have. So I have my work cut out for me, for your humble servant. I'm doing my due. I hope you're doing your due. And I hope the party is doing its due. Right? I'm doing my due. To research, put together stuff, publish it, and it cannot be disputed. I put forward the list of achievements. Who could dispute that as a fact? The facts are right before you. All right? So that's important. So I will do that. So let me now play for you the piece speaking to what our beloved Prime Minister had to say regarding pension reform.
Government says consideration will be given to more than 3,000 contract workers in the public service under the new pension scheme. Cabinet has already approved the pension policy framework, and government will go to Parliament in October to enact legislation to create the new scheme, of which part of the contributions will come from government as the employer and part from the employees. Prime Minister Honorable Deacon Mitchell made the announcement on Monday during his administration's first in a series of town hall meetings to commemorate their second year in government. The new scheme will cater to workers with both contracts for service and off service.
We have committed that come the 1st of October, we will be going to Parliament to enact legislation to create a new pension scheme for these workers to ensure that they have the opportunity to have a pension. And I want to be clear, the established workers who have their pension established by the Constitution, we are not interfering with you. You have your pension, we restored it, we paid the retroactive, and we will continue to pay. But that is a pension that you do not contribute to. That is a pension that is funded entirely by the taxpayers of this country, you, me, all of us. We cannot continue in a situation where you have 3,000 persons who don't have pension. Because when they retire, what will happen to them?
Prime Minister Mitchell said this is the first step in the process to abolish the distinctions between contract for and off service, since they are all government employees and must be treated as such. He said the new pension scheme will be designed so contributions are transferable from one job to the other.
Anyone who's hired by the government thereafter has to come on to the pension system where they contribute, the government contribute, and when you retire, you can have your pension. If you move from the government to the private sector, you could take your pension with you. If you want to exit the government service, you can get the contributions you have made to that pension for yourself. Because I want you to understand something about the current pension system. It has certain rules. You have to work by a certain length of time before you could get it. So if you have to work for 21 years and you want to leave at 18, you cannot leave because you will not get the pension. So we could be honest, some of us grind it out only because we want to make sure we get the pension. But we have to create flexibility. So the new pension scheme will ensure that if you want to leave and you can take your contributions with you. You can transfer your pension to the private sector or to wherever you wish to go.
In 2022, government made pension and gratuity payments to qualified established workers.
Yes. So you heard it there, properly explained. So I am saying, folks, it is easy to understand, right? First, you must know the NNP was in power for 23 years and a half. They did not pay pension and gratuity to public officers who had a right. Well, the court made us know that they had a right to get their pension upon retirement and the gratuity. Some of them died and they did not get it while they were alive. The estates eventually got the pension, right? Some of them 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, they're waiting. They never got it. When NDC came into power, the NDC paid the pension and the gratuity one-off, paid them their money. The NNP was proposing, if they win the election, it would be a thing where they take some of the public officers who retired in this year and pay them, take some and pay them, and the others, they don't know how they get in pay. That was the method outlined by the NNP. So we would have had chaos still. The pension issue in terms of payment would have still been the debated topic, right? But the NDC came and they sorted that out. The NNP estimated that it would have cost $465 million to pay all this pension and gratuity. That was a damn lie from the pit of hell. It only cost us $75.1 million. It could have been less. It could have been $64.5 million. But the most honorable Deacon Mitchell, our beloved Prime Minister, saw it fit to add a number of public officers who are going to lose their years of service because they did not qualify, like a RC, a rural constable. They started working as a rural constable, then they became a police officer, red stripe, and then they do a certain amount of years. They were down to lose the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years they did up front. But they joined that together and gave them a better pension and a better gratuity. So it rose to $75.1 million. You must know also that it was the NNP who introduced contract labor to the public service, the NNP administration. And once you're on contract, they can make you go at any time by giving you 1 month notice in lieu of 1 month notice. All right? And you have no job security. When you retire, you get no pension, no gratuity. That was the public service the NNP was creating. Public officers working and retiring back into poverty with no gratuity and nothing at all. That's a fact. So what the NDC is trying to do now is to make these contract workers permanent, but before they do so, they would put a pension plan in place for them, those who are on contract or temporary, because the pension system as it stands is not sustainable. It's going to run government into bankruptcy. So they have to sort it out. Those who are covered under it now, the permanent and so on, they'll get their money upon retirement. But those who are on contract, who when they retire, they go in with no pension and no gratuity, they will be covered by that new pension scheme. What is wrong with that? Why everything the NNP have a problem with? What is wrong with that? Anybody with a little sense would know. Anybody with a little sense would know. This thing is common sense. And let me clear up 2 things. You hear those NNP pundits and goons, zygotes and sycophants, calling the Plead Your Cause program on WeFM and on their programs, stating that the NDC, when they came into office, increased the salaries of government ministers by $2,000. That's a damn lie. It's a lie, a big lie. Let me explain to you what the NDC did. When the NDC came into power, the NDC met a system whereby, and that was existing under the NNP administration, government ministers were allowed to go to the central police station on the carnage and fill up their vehicles with any amount of gas. And if they had 2 vehicles, they could fill up 2 of them with any amount of gas. You hear me? No accountability. Any amount of gas. And they were also given a paid driver. Government was paying their driver, those ministers of government. So they had a paid driver and they were given free gas at the central police station under the NNP, those ministers of government. The driver was paid almost $2,000 by government to drive these ministers. And the gas would amount on a monthly basis to almost $2,000. So almost $2,000 in gas, and the driver that was driving them would be paid almost $2,000. That's almost $4,000 for a minister of government. When the NDC came in power, they said no. The ministers would drive themselves, and if they have to have a driver, the same $2,000 that they're giving them for traveling allowance, they have to use that to pay their driver. The same $2,000. So they have to use that to pay their driver and to put gas in their vehicle. That is what the NDC did, you know. But those nasty, bad-minded NNP and them out there calling the Shaggy Plead Your Cause program, and on their program making you believe that it was an increase given to those ministers. It was not an increase. It was not an increase. But they would fool some people, the people with sense, based on what I just explained. That's the fact. That's the facts. I'm not making this thing up. I am not making it up. But I will challenge the NDC administration to publish the amount of gas those ministers used to take at the central police station. I could get that information. I could get that information and publish it. I remember when I had my programs, some good sources at the central police station took some snaps at the logbook of the amount of gas some of those ministers under the NNP was actually taking on a monthly basis. And that caused me to say they're greedy, that they're fooling up the vehicle and still taking those weed eater bottles, you know, that you carry gas with for the weed eaters. They're fooling that up too. And I make the joke that they don't even care if it causes the vehicle to blow up while they're going where they're going. First, they're greedy. You hear me? So I am saying you don't need to be a genius to understand that. The government is saving more with what the NDC did regarding the $2,000 traveling allowance. So instead of allowing the ministers to go to the central police station and take free gas or gas that taxpayers have to pay for, amounting to almost $2,000, and just how they exploited the cell phone bill. You remember the cell phone thing is the same kind of scheme, you know. Same kind of scheme. They give them a device, they have them on a plan, and government taxpayers money paying for it. So they didn't care what they did with it. You hear me? Similar thing with the gas at the central police station. So that was what was existing then. The NDC came in and they said, no, $2,000 traveling allowance, and that money has to be used to pay for your gas, and if you have a driver, to pay your driver. We're not giving you anything more. You could drive yourself. You hear me? But those bad-minded, nasty NNP, surrogates, pundits, goons, zygotes, and sycophants, they're out there giving you that impression that the NDC gave some increase to those ministers. That's not true. That is not true. But that's how they function. That's what they do. Going out there to give you this false information. And they're on their programs every day, repeating it over and over and over. After a while, some people are going to believe it. Even some union leaders, the union donkey that I mentioned earlier, he repeated that on one of those interviews. The union donkey. The guy's an idiot, in my belief. And you think he ain't know better? He knows better. He knows better. But no, he would not be honest with the people. He would go out there and talk all this rubbish. So that's the first thing. I had to clear that up to make you know what's going down. Right? And the other thing is the poor relief assistance program. Boy, you know, without Kem Jones on this program here in Grenada, Carrick and P.T. Martinique, explaining certain things, I don't know what would happen now. Right? Or you can't pay me for that, you know. Or you can't pay me for that. You're mad? Pay me for that? To explain all these things? Morning, night? You're joking. You can't. You can't pay me for that. Right? There are some people who are around the government and they benefit in the eating all that food. Nothing wrong with that. They're getting big work, they're getting this, they're getting that. Tell them to come and do what I am doing here. Tell them to come and do that. They can't do it. Just they, you know, because they They get some contract for security, some contract to build some road, some contract to build some house, some contract to do something, some big. That's all they grab. Tell them to come and do what I am doing here. They can't do it. No way. But anyways, the other thing is the 150 that the NNP telling you that the NDC took away from what they say, poor people pension or poor people, or the poor relief assistance or whatever they call it. First and foremost, the money that they are getting is not pension. The poor relief assistance, it is not pension. These people did not work in such a way that they were entitled to some pension. It is not pension. Right? It is poor relief assistance as part of the seed program. They get in that money. In the lead up to the last general election, the NNP increased the amount of money given under the poor relief assistance. So it used to be $300. They increase it to $450. Right? Election time, it's a strategy to get votes, and the NNP administration wanted the people to support them. So they increased the money from $300 to $450, and they increased the amount of people collecting the poor relief assistance because they want votes. They want support from these people. But they never had a budget, like money there allocated for that. They never had a budget for it. So to give this thing over and over consistently, you have to budget for it. But they only did that as a political ploy. If they had won the election, they would have removed that because it was a kind of COVID relief kind of thing, right? COVID relief to give them a little more because things was a bit tougher and so on. When the NDC came into power, the NDC stated clearly that no money was budgeted for that extra 150. But what the NDC did subsequently, the people who were 65 years and older, and that's the majority of people in the program, the majority of people under the poor relief assistance program, they are 65 years and older. So the NDC decided the people who are 65 years and older, they will get $500 now. They will not get $300. They will get $500. And the people with disabilities, mental challenges and so on in the program, they too will get $500. So everybody cannot get. So there are still people who are collecting $300 every month. $300. And there are those who are 65 years and older collecting $500 a month. Those with mental challenges and so on, physical challenges, disabilities and so on, they're collecting $500 a month. That's what it is. So these NNP goons, zygote sycophants out there bumping their gum. But ask them, Keith Mitchell has $19 million. What has he done in Grenada with his $19 million to create jobs and opportunities for people in this country? Ask them that question. He has $19 million. What has he done to create employment and opportunities? Has he opened a pig pen to create 5 jobs or 6 jobs? No. No. But the NNP made these people believe that government has to give them everything. There are some people with the mindset, government has to fix everything. Government has to give them this, give them that. That's what the NNP make these people believe. And the majority of these people are NNP supporters. They're poor and they're vulnerable and illiterate in many cases. The majority of NNP supporters, they are illiterate, they cannot reason, they cannot think for themselves, and they poor and they vulnerable. And who make them poor, vulnerable, and illiterate is the NNP administration. The NNP administration kept these people poor, vulnerable, and illiterate. That is why you have people like Sheldon Scott on program. That is why you have people like Panames, Devon Romain on program. People like Big Carl Caton on program. That is why you have these kind of people on programs. And Prince James, or whatever they call him, and Francis Pear. That is why you have these people on programs speaking, to the NNP supporters many a times, the opposition forces. And when you listen to their program, you have to laugh. They don't have depth. They can't even reason. They can't even speak properly. Many of them cannot. They cannot articulate well. And they, when you listen to their programs, you realize it is to keep these NNP supporters, the majority of them, the NNP supporters, where they are. No upward mobility, no betterment, no improvement, no nothing. Nothing. It's amazing. But look at Keith. He has $19 million. How much do they have? They have nothing. So, folks, I thought I would clear that up. Let me say this. Very soon, I will publish a list of all the con men and crooks that came to Grenada and con the NNP administration. And some local ones too. Cap Bank. You remember Cap Bank? When the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank told the NNP administration, do not grant Flint and the Bog a license to open any bank in Grenada. The NNP administration, the Keith Mitchell-led administration, ignored what the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank was telling them. The body to oversee all the banks within the region. They ignored that. Well, at least those that fall under the ECCU. And they granted him a license. That time you had the offshore banking on the rise in Grenada. Right? Here it is. The bank. There was a time when you had to get a check. You had to go through a certain law firm associated with the NNP administration. You have to go through a certain law firm for them to give you a check, so that it can be changed, so it can change. Yeah. There were times you couldn't get your money there, and they opened all kind of liquor banks all about the place, taking poor people money. Taking poor people money. And then the bank went bankrupt. Millions and millions of dollars vanish. But here it is. The same NNP administration came back and take taxpayers' money and paid depositors in that same private bank, who had $500 and less from taxpayers' money. You telling me that's not a crime? That's a crime against the taxpayers of the country. No wonder some of them come in and defend Sheldon Scott. But anyways, I will talk about that. I will outline that in a document form. So you can have a record of it. So you can go back and look at it and talk about it. The amount of millions and millions and millions of dollars that we lost under the NNP administration. They come in and talk now as though they have some moral standing. They come in and speak as though they care about Grenadians and they care about Grenada. They rob and rape Grenada of the little resources that we had. The NNP administration robbed and raped Grenada of the little resources it had. In my belief, it's scary to just think that those nastiness and them politically want to come back in power. Just think about it now for a moment and it will scare you. But folks, we are way past our time. I want to thank you for being a part of the program. I want to wish you all the best. And I'll be back with you tonight in the hub, starting from 8 in the PM. Today's Thursday. And Speak Out Unfiltered with Kim the King and the guys, Leo Joseph and the others, they would be on at 10. So I want to encourage you to remain on this frequency, Vibes 101.3 FM and Vibes 106.3 FM. All right? They're coming up with a really good program every Thursday on this station. Take good care. Have a wonderful day. I'll be back with you tonight, starting from 8 in the PM. I couldn't be on last night because the station was bringing the town hall meeting from Carriacou live. So I couldn't come on last night. All right? Take good care.